There is a moment, one that arrives without warning, when life feels stuck. When the momentum is gone, the clarity is lost, and you begin to question everything. You sit there wondering why your goals aren't happening, why your energy feels drained, or why you seem to be cycling through the same patterns. And in that moment, the mind naturally wants to blame the job, the relationship, the past, the economy, the way things are. But the truth is far simpler and far more powerful. It's not your environment, it's your state. Your state is the emotional, physical, and mental condition you bring into any moment. It's the lens through which you experience the world. Change that lens and everything changes with it. What most people don't realize is that their emotional state isn't something they're stuck with. It's something they're creating every second, often unconsciously. Think about the times in your life when you've been on fire, those moments where you felt unstoppable, where ideas flowed, where fear took a backseat to certainty. That wasn't an accident. You were in a peak state. And guess what? You put yourself there whether you realized it or not. The key to personal power is this emotion is created by motion. Your physiology, the way you breathe, stand, move, gesture, directly influences how you think and feel. If you slump your shoulders, lower your eyes, take shallow breaths, and speak softly, your mind will follow with low energy thoughts. But if you roll your shoulders back, stand tall, breathe deeply, move with purpose, speak with intensity, your brain receives the signal this is not a time to retreat. This is a time to show up. This is not motivational fluff. This is biology. Your nervous system responds to movement chemical shift. Hormones are released. The brain perceives movement as a trigger. That's why elite athletes use rituals before games. That's why performers stretch, breathe, jump, pace. They're not waiting for the energy to come. They are generating it. Now think about how most people start their day. They hit snooze, scroll their phones, stare into space, maybe drag themselves into the shower. They haven't decided their state. They're reacting, living passively. And then they wonder why the day controls them instead of the other way around. You can't create an extraordinary life with a default emotional setting. You must design your state before the world decides it for you. And it's not just about hype or surface level motivation. This is about choosing how you show up when it matters. How do you walk into a negotiation? How do you enter a hard conversation? How do you prepare for a dream you say matters to you? You won't find your power in hesitation or comfort. You'll find it in commanding your physiology in the moments that count. You don't need perfect circumstances. You need a powerful state. And the beauty of this principle is that you are never more than 10 seconds away from changing it. Want to feel courageous? Stand like someone who's unbreakable. Want to feel gratitude? Breathe like someone who already has enough. Want to feel focus? Cut distractions, square your stance, narrow your gaze, and decide. Your state doesn't just influence your performance, it is your performance. Every decision you make is filtered through the lens of your current state. If you're tired, overwhelmed, stressed, or fearful, your decisions will reflect that. You'll avoid risk, settle for less, and defend limitations. But in a powerful state, you don't just think bigger, you act bolder. You stop asking, what if I fail? And start asking, what must I do now? You can't wait to feel good before you act. That's the trap. That's the illusion that keeps people stuck for years. If you wait for motivation, you may wait forever. But if you move first, if you use your body as the ignition, motivation catches up. You already have the tools, your breath, your posture, your movement, your voice. You don't need to download another app, read another book, or find the perfect playlist. You need to shift now. Because the difference between feeling lost and leading with purpose might just be the way you sit in your chair, the way you walk into the next room, the way you take your next breath. There comes a time in every person's life when they realize the rules they've been living by were never truly theirs. They inherited expectations. They absorbed fears. They accepted limitations disguised as facts. And they looked around at their circumstances, at the job they don't love, the relationships that drain them, the dreams collecting dust, and told themselves, this is just the way it is. But what if that's the lie that keeps people trapped? What if your current condition has nothing to do with your capacity and everything to do with your decisions? It is easy to believe that your future depends on what's around you, the economy, your upbringing, your education, your age, or the resources you have access to. But history is filled with people who came from nothing, started with nothing, knew nothing, and decided. They decided not to settle. They decided to act. They decided to believe in possibility over probability. Because the truth is, the defining moments of your life are not dictated by conditions, they're created by decisions. At every turning point, there is a decision. And those decisions, especially the ones made in private, in silence, when no one is watching, are what shape your destiny. Not the conditions you were handed, not the titles you've been given, not the excuses you were taught to defend. Think of the most pivotal moments in your life. Were they based on perfect timing or ideal conditions? Or were they forged in discomfort, uncertainty, or chaos, and you decided anyway? Some people spend their entire lives reacting to the world around them. They wait for signs. They wait for clarity. They wait for permission. And in that waiting, they lose momentum. They think they're stuck, but really they're just undecided. They haven't fully committed. They've made soft agreements with themselves. I'll try. I'll see what happens. I'll do my best. But there's no power in lukewarm decisions. Power comes from drawing a line in the sand and saying, no more. Power comes when you decide who you are, what you stand for, and what you will no longer tolerate. Every breakthrough begins with a decision. Not a dream, not a plan. A decision. A dream is something you hope will happen. A decision is something you act on. It carries weight. It closes the door to excuses. It opens the door to change, and it's often uncomfortable because real decisions always come with consequences. But the pain of staying the same will always be greater than the discomfort of transformation. You can't control every event in your life, but you can control how you respond. That choice, that ability to decide how to show up in any situation is where your power lies. Two people can go through the same external challenge and walk away with entirely different futures. One sees only the obstacle. The other sees an opening, same condition, different decision. The world rewards decisiveness. People follow clarity. Life opens up when you stop asking, can I? And start declaring, I will. When you decide with intention, your focus sharpens. Your time becomes sacred. Your standards rise. And suddenly, the people, opportunities, and resources you thought were missing begin to appear, not because they weren't there before, but because now you're actually ready for them. You don't need to know every step of the path before you start walking it. You don't need a guarantee of success before you leap. All transformation begins the moment you decide that who you are today is no longer enough for where you're going. It is a shift in identity, a turning point in consciousness, a choice to stop being a product of your conditions and start becoming a product of your decisions. Your future isn't something that will randomly unfold based on how the world treats you. It's something you create, sculpt, and direct through your daily choices. Not once in a while, every single day, the decision to show up fully, the decision to stop tolerating mediocrity, the decision to take responsibility for your life, even when it would be easier to blame. There are no neutral decisions. Every choice either moves you closer to your destiny or keeps you chained to your history. And every time you decide with courage, every time you choose growth over comfort, action over delay, truth over convenience, you realign yourself with your highest potential. Every result in your life, whether it's your health, your finances, your relationships, or your sense of fulfillment, is a direct reflection of your standards, not your goals, not your wishes, not the things you say you want, your standards. Because you will always live in alignment with what you are willing to tolerate, not what you hope to achieve. People don't rise to their dreams. They fall to the level of their standards. And until those standards rise, nothing changes. There's a distinct difference between wanting something and being committed to it. Everyone wants to be fit, financially free, in love, or respected. But if it's just a want, just a preference, then the moment discomfort shows up, the dream disappears. But when something becomes a must, when your standards no longer allow for anything less, you find a way, you shift, you stretch, you grow, because your identity begins to demand it. Raising your standards isn't about perfection. It's not about chasing some unattainable ideal. It's about making a decision about who you are and what is no longer acceptable in your world. It's about drawing a clear boundary between what was and what will never be again. It's the internal shift from I should to I must. And when that shift happens, the world begins to respond differently. People treat you with more respect. Opportunities show up more frequently. You begin to attract situations that reflect the new level you've committed to. Most people struggle because they live by standards they never consciously set. They absorb beliefs from their environment, accept habits from their upbringing, and adopt patterns from people who were never living at the level they aspire to. And then they wonder why they feel stuck, why their results don't match their desires. The problem isn't a lack of motivation, it's a misalignment between their identity and their standards. Because when your standards are low, you'll always find a justification. You'll say things like, "It's not that bad. I'm doing better than most," or "I've tried." But those are the words of someone who's negotiating with mediocrity. And as long as you negotiate with it, you'll live beneath your potential. There is no lasting change without raised standards. You can set all the goals you want, but until your standards change, you'll keep returning to the old behavior. The person who sets a goal to be financially free, but has a standard of living paycheck to paycheck, will sabotage their own progress. The person who wants deep connection but tolerates toxic patterns will never create lasting love. The goal doesn't shape the future, the standard does. Because the standard dictates what you accept when things get hard. And it's in those hard moments that your life is shaped. Raising your standards is a decision that must be made daily. It's not a one-time declaration. It's a constant recommitment to the version of yourself you know you're capable of being. It means showing up when it's inconvenient. It means saying no to people, behaviors, and environments that don't meet the level you've chosen. It means living with integrity, not in the moral sense, but in the alignment sense, where your actions match your values even when no one is watching. There is a power that comes from deciding what is no longer acceptable in your life. When you say, "I no longer miss workouts. I no longer tolerate disrespect. I no longer break promises to myself," you begin to build a reputation with the one person who truly matters, you. Self-respect is earned in those private moments when you choose your standard over your excuse. And with each of those choices, your confidence grows, your clarity sharpens, and your momentum builds. If you look at anyone who has created lasting change, anyone who has transformed their life in a meaningful way, you will find a moment where they raised their standards, where they said, "Enough," where they decided they were done living a life that was less than what they were capable of. That decision didn't come from a place of arrogance. It came from a place of truth, a place where they finally got honest about the gap between who they were and who they were meant to be. There's a truth that governs every human experience, a force more powerful than circumstance, talent, or even opportunity. It's not what happens to you that defines your life. It's the meaning you attach to what happens. That meaning becomes your filter, your story, your identity. And once a meaning takes root, it dictates how you think, how you feel, and what you believe is possible. If you want to change your life, you don't start with the event. You start with the meaning. Two people can go through the exact same experience and walk away with entirely different outcomes. One is destroyed, the other is driven. One becomes a victim, the other becomes a leader. One stays stuck in the story, the other rises from it. The event was neutral. The conditions were the same. The only difference was the meaning each person gave it. Because meaning is the birthplace of emotion, and emotion determines action. Whatever meaning you assign, you will defend it, live by it, and often you will pass it on. Most people aren't walking around with facts, they're walking around with interpretations. They're living inside a narrative that was often shaped in a moment of pain, confusion, or fear. And once the story is written, they live it over and over again. I'm not good enough. People always leave. I never get the chance. It always goes wrong. These aren't truths, they're conclusions. But the brain doesn't need the truth to feel certainty. It only needs repetition. And over time, that meaning becomes part of your identity. It becomes familiar, safe. And even if it hurts, you cling to it because it's what you know. But familiarity isn't freedom. Clarity is. And clarity only comes when you challenge the meanings you've been living by. You begin to ask, what else could this mean? You begin to reframe the very moments that shape your beliefs. Maybe the rejection wasn't a failure, it was redirection. Maybe the loss wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Maybe the pain wasn't the end, it was the beginning of your depth, your compassion, your fire. The moment you shift the meaning, you shift the emotional charge, And when the emotional charge changes, the behavior that follows begins to transform. Mastering meaning isn't about pretending everything is perfect or denying that challenges exist. It's about taking full ownership of your interpretation. You cannot always choose what life hands you, but you can always choose what you make it mean. That's not a cliche. That's power. Because when you stop waiting for events to define you, you start defining your experience. You stop reacting to life and start directing it. Meaning is a decision, not a discovery. And the most powerful people on this planet are not the ones with the fewest problems. They're the ones who have learned to assign empowering meaning to disempowering events. They've trained themselves to turn pain into purpose, setbacks into setups, wounds into wisdom. They don't ignore the pain. They don't skip the process, but they refuse to let the story end in suffering. We live in a world obsessed with control over timing, outcomes, people, and perception. But the only true control we ever have is over the meaning we give to the moment we're in. That is the difference between chaos and clarity, between anxiety and action, between feeling lost and leading with purpose. When you master the meaning, even the most difficult seasons of your life can be used as fuel, not because they were fair, not because they were easy, but because you refused to give them a meaning that made you smaller. Your history is not your destiny unless you decide to relive it. Every moment carries infinite potential for meaning, and the meaning you give to your past will determine the quality of your future. Because it is through meaning that you make sense of who you are, what you're here for, and what's possible now. Pain can either become your prison or your platform. The choice is made in the story you tell, in the lesson you extract, in the power you choose to see even when it's hard to find. There is a level of fulfillment that achievement alone will never reach. You can build, accumulate, and succeed by almost every standard the world offers, and yet still feel a void that refuses to be filled by more. Because after a certain point, it's not about what you get, it's about what you give. Contribution is the highest human need, and until your life is aligned with something greater than yourself, there will always be a part of you that feels incomplete. Many people chase success thinking it will bring meaning, but success without contribution is hollow. It's short-lived. It feels exciting in the moment, but it doesn't last. That's why you see people who seem to have everything, money, status, recognition, and yet feel anxious, lost, or disconnected. They've mastered performance, but they haven't mastered purpose. And purpose is found in service. It's found in pouring your strength, your time, your gifts into something that lifts others up. Living to contribute isn't about charity or obligation. It's not about guilt or pressure. It's about alignment. It's about waking up and knowing that your actions matter, not just to you, but to someone else. It's knowing that your story, your pain, your growth, your resilience can be used as a bridge for someone else's transformation. That what you've overcome can become the guidepost for someone who hasn't yet found their way through. That your life isn't just about you. It's about the ripple you create. In a world driven by comparison and competition, contribution is the one place where ego falls away. Because when you contribute from a place of authenticity, there's no scoreboard. There's no need to prove anything. You're not trying to be better than anyone. You're trying to be of service. And that shift in intention changes everything. It changes how you lead, how you speak, how you connect. People can feel the difference between someone who's chasing attention and someone who's driven by impact. One creates noise. The other creates legacy. Contribution doesn't mean you have to be perfect or have all the answers. It means showing up. It means asking, how can I serve with what I have? Maybe it's your time. Maybe it's your presence. Maybe it's your skill, your words, your experience, or simply your willingness to listen. Every person has something to give, but not everyone gives it. They hold back, waiting to be more ready, more confident, more qualified. But contribution isn't about being ready. It's about being real. And it starts where you are, with what you've already been through. There's a sacred kind of energy that comes when you shift your focus outward. When you start thinking beyond yourself, your problems shrink. Your stress doesn't disappear, but it's no longer center stage. You begin to see patterns, connect the dots, sense possibilities that were invisible before. Why? Because you've shifted out of survival and into significance. You've gone from protecting your identity to living your mission. And the most powerful missions are never self-contained. They're expansive, inclusive. They lift people, not just profiles. Contribution creates fulfillment because it taps into our core need to matter. Every human being wants to know they made a difference, that their life meant something, that their presence shifted the room in some way. And that's not selfish, that's sacred. Because when you give from a place of truth, you're not losing anything. You're multiplying energy. You're not draining yourself, you're activating your highest self. Even in the smallest acts, there is a kind of magic when intention meets service. A kind word at the right time, a lesson shared that saves someone years of struggle, a moment of honesty that gives someone else permission to do the same. These are the contributions that never make headlines but change lives in the most lasting way. Because it's not about the scale, it's about the sincerity. When you decide to live as a contributor, you start measuring success differently. It's not just about how much you have, but how much you've helped. It's not about how far you've come, but how far you've reached. It's not about building a life that looks impressive from the outside, but one that feels aligned on the inside. A life where your actions echo beyond you. A life where the people who cross your path are better for it. A life where you become the kind of person who leaves people, places, and moments better than you found them. You are not defined by your past, your pain, or your current position. You are defined by your potential and your power to decide. Every transformation begins with a moment of truth, and if you've made it here, this is that moment. When you shift your state, you awaken energy that's been dormant, clarity that's been buried, and drive that's been waiting for permission. When you recognize that decisions, not conditions, shape your destiny, you reclaim the steering wheel of your life and stop handing it over to your circumstances. When you raise your standards, you stop negotiating with mediocrity and start aligning with the version of yourself who no longer accepts less than excellence. When you master the meaning, you no longer let the past hold the pen. You become the author of your story and the architect of your future. And when you live to contribute, you rise beyond success and step into significance, where fulfillment isn't a goal, it's your natural state. This is not just about changing how you think, it's about changing how you live. Because the moment you decide to unleash the power within, the life you were meant to live starts moving toward you just as fast as you move toward it. This is your time. This is your turning point. The rest of your story hasn't been written yet, and now you hold the pen.